episode of Let's Go Candid with URJA, we get to talk to Mr. Gautam Raj Anand, who is the founder of Hubhopper. Hubhopper is one of India's largest podcasting platform with over 1 million hours of audio content. In this candid conversation, he takes us through his journey of starting out his own venture at a young age, following one's passion, taking risks, and his 20 seconds mantra to success. He speaks about the importance of having a vision to build a startup and having like-minded folks around. Watch this episode of Let's Go Candid with URJA to get inspired from this amazing personality. Hi everyone, welcome to yet another amazing episode of Let's Go Candid with URJA. Your tremendous response on our previous episode has left us overwhelmed, so we are back with yet another inspiring guest today, Mr. Gautam Raj Anand. Mr. Gautam Raj Anand is the founder of Hubhopper, which is one of India's largest platforms for podcast and audio content, providing various services to podcasters, including hosting, recording, and distributing material free of cost. He holds an economics honors degree from Delhi University and has previously worked at Barclays Bank PLC as a senior risk analyst before stepping into the world of startups. He's a member of Forbes 30 Under 30 Asia under Media and Technology, nominee of Economic Times 40 Under 40, and has also been awarded as Entrepreneur of the Year 2018. A very, very warm welcome to you, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Similpreet, for that wonderful introduction. I'm not sure I'm deserving of it, but glad to be here and thank you all once again for taking out the time. So let's go. Let's. I'm happy to discuss podcasting, and I mean, no better medium to do it than within a podcast itself, which you guys are recording.
I agree. So let's start with the first segment of the interview. So we have two segments, and each segment has a set of questions that has been gathered by the team. And now for the main segment, the first question we have is that it has been more than 6 years into the creation of Hubhopper, and it now stands as India's largest podcasting platform with over 1 million hours of audio content spread across 15 vernacular languages. So we're curious to know, sir, what motivated you to set up Hubhopper?
Okay, so thanks for the question. I'm going to try to be as honest and candid in all of the answers that I give you guys. So the honest to God truth is that, I mean, there is a rehearsed answer to a question like this, and then there is an honest answer. The honest answer is that I actually really loved the medium. I fell in love with the medium while I was working at Barclays. In contrast to the other mediums like video or text, or even music, I found non-music audio content to be, special in its own way. Video and text required you to be immersed into the content, so you couldn't really do anything else while consuming it. And then when it came to music, for a person like me, it became very repetitive, right? So I started to look at podcasts and started to consume a bunch of podcasts from the lens of initially upskilling myself. But very quickly I fell in love with the medium because I started consuming content across genres in this medium. So whether that was true crime, whether that was horror, comedy, whether that was ASMR, whether that was upskilling myself, I was basically consuming large amounts of content in this medium. It was my initial love for this space that, made me see non-music audio content for what it was, and which was two things. On the one hand, I found it to be unique in the way that it actually was less literacy intensive, language intensive, and capital intensive than other mediums. So it was actually very special in that regard. Because it didn't treat English in a better light than it treated Bengali, like other mediums do on the internet, or English over Punjabi or something else. And then the second thing was that I really sort of liked the fact that while the word podcast was new to us, the medium was not new to us at all. We'd all been consuming stories all of our lives. We'd all been consuming cricket commentary. We'd all been consuming, audio through YouTube without looking at the screens. We just never knew to call it a podcast. And when I saw that this medium was actually something that we'd all grown up consuming through the Hanuman Chalisa or Granth Sahib or something or the other, um, it became fairly evident to me that there would be a space for a set of products in the non-music audio space. Since there weren't any products at the time, I thought it would be a good opportunity to be somebody that actually took advantage of that and started building for the space. So on the one side, it was both opportunity, but on the other side, it was like severely large amounts of passion for the space.
That's actually very insightful. And as you said, passion drives everything you do. So that's really great to hear. So, like Hubhopper is a podcasting platform majorly. And
And
given that when you started it in 2015, it was something new, of course. But now we're in 2021, and this
Mhm.
industry is sort of getting very competitive. And it does get difficult to survive given that there are so many other platforms as well, like Spotify, there's Google Podcasts, and so many more platforms. So,
Yeah.
what sets Hubhopper apart, and how does it stand out from the other podcasting platforms?
That's an awesome question, Simarpreet. So, when you look at all of these companies from a 50,000 foot view, you think of all of them in the podcasting space. But actually, all of them hold their own positions in the podcasting space. And ironically enough, they're not actually competing. We're not competing with any of them. We're complementing them and they are complementing us. Um, what I mean by this is, in essence, Hubhopper is India's largest podcast hosting, creation, and distribution company, right? So anybody, whether it's you guys, whether it's your college, whether it's your friends, you guys can start a podcast using Hubhopper. So you can actually record your podcast using Hubhopper, host on Hubhopper, and then we are partnered in with Google Podcasts, Amazon Prime Music, Ghana, Savan, Wink, Hangama, Spotify. So when you actually distribute from Hubhopper, you land up in not just Hubhopper, but your podcast goes live in all of these platforms. So we actually support the supply of content within these platforms, and these platforms actually support Hubhopper in the way that they are many faces to Hubhopper's content consumption. I hope that's making sense. So basically, we aren't actually competing with them; they're complementing, avenue. So, for example, Hubhopper is integrated across all Xiaomi devices in the country, right? So, if you consume a podcast in Xiaomi today, more often than not, you're streaming it from us. Similarly, if you consume a podcast in Ghana today, you're streaming it from us. If it's an Indian podcast, matlab, the people have built the podcast and they're hosting it on Hubhopper, and we are a one platform that will get you into multiple avenues, sort of software, right? Um, Now, the benefit for a creator is the fact that if they're distributing directly from Hubhopper, they'll get all of their analytics on one tool itself. They can distribute from one avenue, they'll create on one avenue, they'll get all of their additional tools on Hubhopper Studio itself, and then they can be consumed across all of these different platforms. Much to the contrary, we've actually convinced Wink to get into podcasts, for example, and we try to get them into podcasts. We are Amazon Prime Music's only partner in podcasts in India. We got Hangama into podcasts. So we're forcing these guys into podcasts and shoving it down their throat, saying, Ki aap karo, you guys bring podcasts out of your platform.
That's actually informative, and saying that it makes it a lot easier for a creator to kind of then distribute their content instead of
Exactly.
looking for options individually without any kind of help. That,
Exactly.
yeah. So, moving on to our next question. So, in one of your interviews, or maybe I think your Josh talks, I had heard that you talked about that, when you were working at Barclays, you did not enjoy any of it. You just did it because you had to, because everybody's supposed to go to work and earn money, but,
Mhm.
you didn't really connect to that job. So, I mean, then you called it quits with the job and decided to start with Hubhopper, which was a completely different journey, and there was obviously a lot of risk involved. So, how did
Yeah.
you feel when you achieved your first milestone with Hubhopper, and what are the some important life lessons that you learned during this time when you transitioned from a well-paid, stable job to a more riskier business of starting out on your own?
Okay, awesome. You're asking some riveting questions, Simranpreet. Not bad. Okay, so first things first is, when I left, I felt like a big weight had been lifted off me. And the first realization, and I think leaving in itself was my first milestone. And in leaving, you realize that, and it's a big realization that you don't actually have to conform to the shatabdi that you've been put on. We've all been put on this train track, and I mean, none of us opted to be put onto this train track that we've been put on. And this train track has different stations that we're going on, and none of us are questioning those stations that we have to stop off at, get off at, have chai at, and then get back on the train for. I mean, but leaving and actually, being a rebel in that scenario, I was still 22 years old. It was liberating because it was almost a realization to the fact that you could, walk to the beat of your own drum. And whether that took you in a sort of positive direction or negative direction, at least you were making those decisions based on your own autonomy, and you were making those decisions on your own, and then you could sort of be held accountable for your own decision making. That in itself is a very empowering thought, especially when you're young and you're 21, 22. I'm cognizant of the fact that I'm speaking to 21, 22-year olds. So it's important to know that, like, you don't have to do the proverbial sort of 9 to 5s, and you don't have to do sort of the snakes and ladders game that we've been shown, all our lives. Now, in terms of what was the first milestone and objective, your milestones, ironically enough, keep changing. You become very insatiable, and that's a very terrible aspect of a founder. And when you're in a startup, the second you reach your milestone, you suddenly your greed has changed, and that was not your milestone. Milestone's gone in front. So it both keeps driving you ahead, but on the other hand, you never feel a sense of 100% satisfaction. So I can't even remember what the first milestone was. Was my first milestone hiring a techie when I wasn't from a tech background? Maybe. Was it getting on, sort of uh, getting our first product live? Was it doing our first, sort of market research test? I don't know. I don't actually know what our first victory was, because the second we reached that victory, it wasn't a victory any longer for us. Hope that answers your question.
And anything you learned, like what it taught you, this entire journey of just, making that decision when you were in a dilemma, when you transitioned and now you see yourself. So,
Yeah, of course. I mean, every day is a learning experience. So many things is that, I mean, one thing is that I definitely have seen over the years that the more knowledgeable somebody becomes, and the more successful people are, the more innately humble they tend to be, and the more innately hungry for knowledge they tend to be. And when you see people with massive inflated senses of self, it's usually masking some sort of insecurity. You generally see that, especially when you're not in the corporate environment where people have to have a particular manner and code of conduct. You see that in an environment that's unbridled, like the startup environment. You definitely learn that you need to make off the cuff decisions, and you need to make gut based calls, and you have to live with that. You realize that people are the most important aspect of an organization. That's not just in saying it. Functions are always replaceable, people aren't very replaceable. the function that people perform will always be replaceable. I'd say that being passionate about what you do, especially when you're young, is a very important element. And it's for some we're often taught to not explore that side of us. It's much better to be passionate about something, try it, fail at it, and then not have the regret in your life that you never gave it a go. So I'd say to foster that flame and to make sure that you try whatever because to be really honest, nothing is holding you back right now. All of the fears are all self-created fears. They're all either societal expectations or they're psychological fears that you put onto yourself. You can create whatever you want, even if your dreams are to be very successful in the corporate ladder. Go after them. There's nothing really stopping you other than your own fear of your limitations.
Since this podcast, really after it goes out, I'm sure a lot of people from our college and also around, including us at URJA, will feel very empowered because, as you mentioned, that you made this decision when you were 22, and we are also touching our 20s. So I think we might not have the confidence to make that decision on our own, but when you listen to stories of people around you who took the plunge, you get motivated.
Glad to hear that. I can tell you that I was shit scared throughout the process. I just kept counting to 20. I would make a decision and I would roll with it. It's not as though I had an immense dose of confidence or an immense dose of self-assurance. Was just I was just sort of making folk-based decisions on what my gut was telling me. And your gut is rarely wrong.
So talking about decisions, one very interesting quote I would say that you mentioned is that sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. So
Yes.
has this mantra always worked very well for you in all the decisions you've made, or you've needed to slow down in some of them?
So in the beginning, of course, it really, really works well. As you become a funded organization and you have VCs on your cap table and stuff like that, then you need to be a little bit more cautious. But for somebody who's starting out, it's the best mantra there is, honestly, because you need the way that I always like to put it is that I had you need that sense of idealism, and you need to not be limited by by overthinking. So the way that I would look at every decision, because if I had started to ponder the way that the mantra works is that whenever you're faced with a decision, especially when you're just starting out, you begin counting to 20. I borrowed this from a movie. And by the time you reach 20, whatever your heart's telling you take that decision and go for it. So this decision helped me in my professional life tremendously, but also my personal life. It helped me find the woman that I fell in love with. It helped me find get married to her and helped me ask her to marry. It also, on the other side of things, helped me register Hubhopper because you're very scared at that point in time. It helped me quit my job. It helped me hire my first developer. It helped me take my first development course myself. So on both sides, when you're just starting out, it's extremely important because you need that almost misguided idealism, and you need that ability to sort of make instinctive decisions without going too deep into the analytical aspects of it. Because even when you're looking at something like podcasts, right? 6 years ago, who on earth would have thought that a podcast medium or a podcast company would manage to sort of make it mainstream? If you started to look at data, that data didn't exist, because if that data had existed, then we would have already been too late. Unfortunately, what happens is a lot of econ students like I was, or a lot of business students like you are, is that whenever somebody asks us to look at a space, for example, we start looking at data in that space, and then we start to see what is the growth trajectory in this space, right? And then we try to chart out what has been the last 3 years of growth in this space, what is the total addressable market in this space, things like that. But the problem is that if that data exists, that means you're already, in my opinion, too late. That means already people have begun to factor in that space. People have already begun to build for that space. People have already started writing research in that space. But if you're looking at a space that hasn't been explored at all, like podcasts, and you innately feel a sense of belief in it, and you don't find data in it, that shouldn't dissuade you from doing it. That should actually propel you towards doing it. And the only way to do that is if you can make instinctive calls by, like, say, counting to 20. I hope I'm making sense and not just rambling on and on.
So, so yes, that reminds me of this. I think I read it somewhere on the internet that, in the hearts of the hearts, you already know what you want. It's just your
Yeah,
intuitions that, dust your paths. You need to be clear. So I think everybody who's going to stream this podcast should know that just count till 20 and go for it.
yeah, for sure.
So moving on. So you are a Delhi University graduate yourself, and our college also falls under the university. So I would want to know, like, what is your opinion about a college or a university's role in one's life? Like, when we go for placements or something like that, when we sit in interviews, we don't know how the recruiters weigh intelligence. Do they find knowledge and experience more valuable, or they think a professional degree is, the prerequisite? So what do you think? Like, where should we focus? Like, a professional
I'd
degree
say, I
or
mean, yeah. I mean, the end goal shouldn't be to get the approval from that hiring body. That's just the start of your like story, and like don't try to derive self worth from there. You don't get a job there, that's irrelevant, in my opinion. And if people are looking at only one form of intelligence, there's a quote by Albert Einstein, I think, which says that if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its entire life believing that it's stupid, right? So, like, different people have different skill sets, and life is beautiful in the way that it's an exploration of yourself internally to see what your uh, where your sort of not just intelligence but genius lies. And that's one of the really beautiful parts of, I think, college is a time in your life when you just left school, where more often than not you spent the last 10-12 years with the same group of people. College lets you explore different types of people. It lets you explore yourself. You never are as villa as you are in college. It's really amazing in that regard. um, I'd say take in the entire experience. I really hope not all of you guys are in your third year, and it sucks that COVID has happened. But more often than not, don't just look at college as an exercise to sort of learn a particular course. I mean, I can promise you nobody's asked me about the Keynesian model ever since I left college. And neither have I been coached or tested on my econometric skills. But like, what you do realize is that if you can, um, like, for me personally, I found a lot of um, joy in being able to gel well with people from different walks of life. Open my horizons to different types of intelligence, different types of people. I had grown up in otherwise a very, like, a very small pond of very similar like-minded people. And coming to college exposed me to a very wide array of people, and it allowed me to actually view them for the beauty that they brought to the table. So that was one thing, and it also allowed me to explore myself and understand myself a little bit more deeper. Your curriculum is, I would say, the smallest part of your entire college experience. Look to building your IQ, your EQ, your CQ, all of these things, and also along the way make sure that you don't fail. That just don't fail. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, talking about college life, I think I personally haven't seen college.
Mm.
Like it's my second year and I haven't been able to go to college. So the college life thing hits me hard
Yeah.
when you're talking about it, because it's obviously comes with a lot of other experiences. We have it, but then college is just a laptop for us right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, but I'll tell you, if I was to make a suggestion, is like, unfortunately, the Indian mentality, and this is I mean, I'm the biggest proponent of Indian mentality, like things on most aspects. We're a very, very community driven country. We are more empathetic than most others. But in one aspect, I would urge you to, if you guys haven't got the whole year sort of college experience, don't necessarily try to run in and get that job immediately. I mean, try to also potentially, if you can, if it's a possibility, take those 6 months and potentially even travel or something. Just explore yourself, explore, find people, explore communities after college, within college, during this time, whatever you can do to make your experience a little bit more wholesome and a little bit more, sort of not just you and a laptop. I would really, really urge you to do that, because this is a very special time in your life.
yes, that we'll keep that in mind and we'll plan a vacation really, really soon. So, like I mentioned that, often like people face the dilemma between a degree or whether to, considering that more than the knowledge aspect. So that brings me to another question, which is that, even if in our own hearts we're passionate about something and we want to start something of our own, say build our own startups, it's the family or it's the people around us who want us to pick up a more stable corporate job, and then once we have some kind of experience, then they say, okay, then when you're done here you can then start with something of your own with your own money, but collect some money and all that. So like, what do you suggest? How do we face that, know that I want to work on this, I don't want to go for the corporate job?
So firstly, I have 2-3 points here. Point number one is that going down the corporate route's not a bad route. It's not as though it works for some people, and for some people that structure is something that works for them. But for a lot of others, it doesn't. Now, unfortunately, one is a safer bet. So automatically, a lot of parents and a lot of like folks in and around you, they're coming from a place of wanting to be protective. So even if that protection may come across as authoritative, they're just trying to essentially say, make sure you have your ducks in a row before making risky choices. But you're 21, 22. If you're not going to make risky choices right now, this is my hypothesis, when you're going to make those risky choices. And truth be told, there are two things that I believe definitely occur if you are the latter, if you are somebody that believes in the startup kind of world. Number one is that it's like telling somebody to get addicted to a drug, which is your monthly salary, and then tell them that you get addicted for 5 years and then you leave your addiction, and then after that, like, you can, sort of do whatever you want. At the end of the day, that once that's taken place, entire HR policies are built in a structure to make people panic and not want to leave and to stay and retain and XYZ. And like, there are entire CRM structures just built for that purpose itself. So I believe that that argument itself doesn't necessarily hold true. And second of all, that argument definitely doesn't hold true in the manner that I believe that whenever you start a startup, you're going to suck at it. It doesn't matter whether you're 25, 35, 45, 55. You're going to suck in the beginning for sure, because it's a very different type of structure. So it's better to be terrible at something when you're younger and then learn more rapidly than to quit when you're 40, have kids at that time and have, like XYZ responsibilities, and then quit and panic and then want to run back. So from that perspective, if you are the type B type of individual who is not a corporate type of individual, then it's better to make this decision early, and it's better to sort of I would say, like, suck at it initially. Although this does come with one caveat, and that's the only caveat that I have, is building a startup for a startup's sake is not the way to go about this at all. If you like the startup environment, then join a startup. The only reason to start a startup or to start a company, and startup is a very abused word today, is if there is a problem in the current functioning of a particular industry that you have identified, and you believe that there should be a solution that can exist in that market, and you could potentially be the individual or a set of individuals to solve for that solution. You don't need too much, but you need to start with that level of foundation at least. Up until then, you can join a startup environment and see if that environment suits you, but only start a startup with the realization that there is a problem in a market and you want to solve for that problem in that market. You don't need much more information than that, but at least start with that information. A lot of people, unfortunately, start with kaunsa space hot hai, and then accordance to kaunsa space hot hai, they'll try to build in accordance to that. But if it's hot, that means you're already too late, as I just mentioned, right? So that's like one of the weirdest meetings I ever had in my life. Is I was 24 years old. A guy called me into. He said, I can do this. I can do this. I am. He said, I want to. He said, मैं startup बनाना चाहता हूँ. आप startup को run कर लो. So I was very confused. I was like, who the hell is this guy? It's a very strange meeting. Eventually, he keeps telling me about how he'll get funding from here. You realize in the first 5 minutes of this conversation that it's complete rubbish and nonsense. So telling you, I'll get funding from here, I'll do this, my chacha knows this, my auntie is this person, this is that person. And then at the end of the, I kept getting more and more irritated. So then after about 5, 7, 8 minutes, I was like, this is all well and good, man, but what are you trying to build? He said, Magar, isliye to maine aapko idhar bulaya hua hai. You tell me what I have to build. So he didn't have any idea what he wanted to build, which space he wanted to build in, what problem there was in any market. He just wanted to build a startup for the sake of it. That is one reason why you shouldn't.
So the gist is that, you really need to have a vision, and you really need to go for it, like, with passion, and be ready to face the failures as well, because it's not always the silver lining, like open a startup and then ho gaya.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, 100%. It's a lot of work, but it's a very rewarding experience.
Of course, it's worth the work, I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So talking about startups, so obviously starting a new business involves a lot of planning and a lot of decision making, and decisions may turn out good or bad. So can you tell us about the hardest decision you ever had to make, and how did you deal with it?
Okay. That's okay. So yeah, of course. So about 2 to 3 years in, this has happened a couple of times. You'll get like at different points in your company, if you've begun to build something of value, you will get like offers, whether those are investment offers or acquisition offers. Now, when you're running a startup, you're often always living a dichotomous life. You're living both, like you're feeling as though you're on the top of a mountain, but you're also feeling that you're at the bottom of the sea and being crushed. So you'll be having really like heady meetings, but at the end of the day, your office is in a basement and there's ceiling all around, right? So when you're being made an offer from somebody, at the end of the day, you need to ask yourself whether that offer is something that works for you right now, or is it something that if you turn down, would you repent it if your startup eventually fails, or you don't sort of make it into what you plan to make it into? And that's something that like is a very scary thought for you to make, especially when you're 24, 25 years old. If somebody comes to you and on the table they're telling you that I'm going to make you this offer and I'm going to give you this type of stability and also this validation from the market, that you will be one of the very, very few 0.0001% of companies that manages to get acquired, right? Do you want to take that route, or do you want to continue to be in an unstable environment because you believe in your vision and you want to build further. That is a fork that's always very hard to take. So that is one type of decision that's always very difficult for you to make, and then you do like go back and forth in your head on that quite a lot. It's very human. And then the second thing is decisions on people. If you hire wrong, it is the most painful decision ever. And sometimes when you're in a crunch, or you're either trying to save on capital, or you're trying to let's say where you're trying to hire in a hurry, you'll end up hiring somebody who may like fit 2 3 criteria for you, but they may not fit the fourth and fifth. And those fourth and fifth become very painful because you spend like 6 months training that particular person, and then that person just not fitting in your organization. So this is definitely I mean, these would be two scenarios in which you do face like, if this, I mean, it f's with your head, for lack of a better word.
Yes, I mean, I totally agree that when you're on a crossroad, and talking about that, you said that the hardest decision is also when you hire the wrong people. So that brings me to a question that comes up in my mind right now, is that, when the pandemic happened, the setup changed to work from home. And so obviously nobody was very motivated. Like after a point, first it was fun, but after a point of time it was a little difficult, like in the work from home setup. So how did
Yeah.
you motivate your employees, and what kind of relationship do you have with them? Like what's the work culture?
Well, it's hard. It's also hard to like, the first one of the main things to do is like, we got a very open work culture, and we got very like, touchwood, we're all great friends. Like we go out for drinks every Friday, we play football every Wednesday. It's very like, it's not hierarchical, because that's one of the things that I hated in Barclays. Like if a senior management person came downstairs, everybody ran behind them like they were, sort of trying to marry him or her. It was really absurd. So ours is very like, it's a very level playing field across everybody, and it's a very fun environment. Uh, that said, when the pandemic hit, it's also important to realize that you don't like, certain situations just do suck. It's like, it's hard to, it's like, it's also important to not sugarcoat it. So like, oftentimes, like being there for the people in and around you, and just telling them and like having long conversations with people if they're feeling low, if they're feeling bad, having constant, team calls, something that we did every single day. They propped me up, I propped them up. The only thing that I made sure to do was I always kept people first. So when we were cutting expenses, we cut everything else around. But people was not something that we were willing to compromise on. And you were seeing across the board people being furloughed, people being this, people doing that. So I made the one like promise to my team, which was that like, up until the last, like whatever, you know if up until the last, position that we could be pushed to, touchwood, things never reached such a dire state for us, but you were seeing this happen all across. So people in any job were feeling slightly like wary and uncomfortable. So it's important for folks in the organization to give a sense of comfort and give a sense of assurance that like, we value people, like I've said, over function. Everything else is replaceable. So, tell people that, we will be there for you. And then in turn, you can't imagine how much loyalty you get right back at you. So
That's really good to know that, everybody inside the organization is very open and very comfortable with each
yeah,
other. Makes work easier.
yeah,
So
100%. I mean, you set up basic structures like an OKR structure, where in the OKR itself, you can ask people what are certain non-work-based things that they have been working on, how have they grown in those hobbies, where is their mental state currently, do they need to talk to somebody. You can create a system for anonymity. So if people have suggestions that they want to give, either people or the organization as a whole, they can actually give anonymous, like anonymous, tips, or anonymous like suggestions, without feeling, without having a fear of like prosecution, or without having a fear of being sort of pulled out for those sorts of things. and then having an open environment. All of these things are super important.
Indeed, I totally agree with this. So yeah, moving on. Now, at the age of 29, I mean, are you 29? Because I don't want to. Yeah, so at the age of 29, you have some of the most prestigious milestones in your name, like being featured in the coveted list of Forbes 30 under 30 to being nominated for Economic Times 40 under 40. How does it feel to be in such a position? Does it come with a lot of pressure and or does it come with a lot of responsibility?
I mean, they just lists and they just awards. Uh, I but at the end of the day, like, I'd be a liar if I said that I didn't enjoy them when I received them, or I'd be a liar if I said that I didn't covet them before I got them. But once you get them, you realize that they're just this. And at the end of the day, like, they're really nice to have, and they don't necessarily put pressure. Like certain of these things, like Fortune and Forbes, they're very good because they allow you to be exposed to that cohort of people. So, like, you'll go for summits and you'll go for meets, and you'll meet very like-minded, very ambitious people, and you'll feel like the stupidest person in the room, and that's a great feeling to have. To feel as though everybody in and around you is you're brighter than you, and more driven, and it drives you. So I mean, I'm super glad and I'm super happy to have been considered for a few of these awards. What does give me more joy, however, is, and this is honest to God, like, truthful, is when I see like a podcaster being converted. Like, if like there are how many people in this call? Let's say that out of this conversation, people believe that there is value in creating a podcast, or if people believe that there is an opportunity in telling their story or finding their voice, and that they find Hubhopper's products to actually give a solution for them there. That's something that gives me a lot more internal joy, because it's almost in creating parallels to having a kid, I would say, like, where you almost feel as though, like, whatever you built, or whatever, like, that product that you have, it almost feels as though that, in getting validation for that product, you're feeling a great sense of, yeah, theek hai, maine apna job kar liya, I did what I needed to do. It's a well mannered child. So it's from that perspective. So yeah. I hope that answers your question. Definitely feels great to have these awards. Definitely did covet them in my early 20s. And once you get them, you still feel happy to have them, but you feel more joy in seeing your KPIs of your organization, sort of being met.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, the kind of work you do and the kind of humility you have, I think you deserve all those milestones you've achieved, and there's a lot more to happen. So, thank you so much. I mean, all these answers were so candid and amazing, and I think all of us are very motivated by all those answers, and there is so much to learn from your journey. I had a lot of fun doing this segment, and now, with your permission, we would proceed to the next segment, which is the rapid fire.
Of course. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
And thanks, Samir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, over to you, Harleen.
Good afternoon, Harleen. How are you?
I'm good, sir. And how about you?
I'm doing very well.
Okay, sir. I heard all of your responses and they were truly honest, I must say. And they were unique and inspirational too. So now let's start with the next segment, which is the rapid fire round.
Awesome. Let's go for it.
Okay, so here comes the first question. How would you describe yourself in 3 words?
Uh, how rapid is rapid? I'd say
You can take a few
passion,
minutes, sir.
passionate, uh, driven, but average.
That's quite interesting, sir. Okay, so next question. If a movie was made on your life, what genre would you choose and who would you like to play your role?
I mean, if there's a movie, I'd like to play the role. Why? No, I'm joking.
That's good, sir.
No. So I'd say a family, like, a wholesome family movie that has a comedic element to it would be most sort of appropriate. Definitely not like an action movie or a horror movie. And who would play me? I don't know, man. That you guys can decide that. I'd be too conceited to say something like that.
Indeed, sir, that sounds good. Okay, so besides Hubhopper, what's something that you have done and you are proud of?
Okay, so I like. I actually like trekking. I like going and finding different like spots, nature-based spots in and around the city and around the country. It's something I love to do. I like brewing alcohol. So like you can make like different types of ciders and malts and wine. So that's something that I do. Outside of that, things that something that I've done that I'm proud of. Um, I'd say I always try learning. Always like I'm always trying to learn off the job, on the job, whatever that is. I'm not like I learn this and then this is the ROI from this and then iska ye hoga. Whether it's World War II documentaries, whether it's geology, whether it's astronomy, anything. I'm very hungry for information.
That's commendable, sir. Moving on to the next question. Can you name any three business personalities that have inspired you the most during your life?
Sure. So okay. I'll give you one. I'll give you examples and I'll tell you why. And they'll all be a different. Okay, so you'll understand why they'll all be differently, like why for different reasons. So I'd say Dipender Goyal from Zomato. Why is basically because I'm a big fan of people that have big fan of innovators and people that have built something from scratch, and like literally he built an industry that didn't exist before it. And it's an industry that is trying to be adopted by other countries. And like if you look at the example of like the Indian entrepreneur or the Indian startup, I think him, like I think that is the best of the best of what a country like ours has to offer in terms of taking a space, understanding the pros of what India has to sort of bring to the table, and then building an entire model around it. And what they've done, and I've said this for years, way before they went public. So him in terms of what he's been able to do at such a young age. In terms of somebody older in India, you'd look at somebody like a Ratan Tata, only because of how poised they are and how like humble they are, even despite having sort of done so many things, that they're still so sort of poised, grounded, and humble. In terms of globally, I'd say again, I don't think I think his name is Steve Wozniak, but not because of who he is, but the guy who started Uber. Just because of what Uber was, it was such a serious idea, and it changed the way all of us commuted. And whether an Ola and all of these other Lyft and Ola and all these companies are doing better or worse than an Uber, it never mattered to me. For me, it was the innovator that will always be the one that I'll admire. That basically looked at the world in one way and said, oh no, there's another way to do this, and that could be an interesting way. Finally, one personal person who I is an advisor to me is this guy named Devraj Sanyal. He is the MD and CEO of Universal Music. He, just because I work with him at a very close proximity, so I speak to him once every 2 days or so. I see the amount of drive and energy he has, and I'm very like inspired to see anybody like have such a never-ending amount of drive and energy and like fire.
I absolutely agree, sir, that you said about Ratan Tata. They have actually inspired a lot of people. And also you have been inspired by young generation. Like you have just been inspired by different types of personalities, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So now this is an interesting one. Suppose you had a time machine to go back in time. What would you like to change?
Would I like to change?
Yes.
That's hard.
That's why it's interesting.
I don't know, man. The British coming to India.
Oh, now that seems compelling. Okay. Anything else, sir?
I mean, I think that's a compelling enough answer. What else? The British going to America. I don't know.
That's all right, sir. Okay, sir. So, what's one thing about your work that almost no one agrees with you about?
That nobody agrees with me about.
Yes, sir.
Okay. That any skill can be picked up at any age, regardless of experience.
Okay, sir. I agree with you. Even though you are correct, you cannot make anyone believe that you are correct as they can't see it from your perspective. Okay, sir. So, finally, this is the last question of the rapid fire. Can you name any three podcasts that you would recommend to all and why?
Uh, I mean, that'd be hard because I listen to a specific, I mean, so in the genre that I'm currently listening to are more true crime related, but I'll give you a list. There's a podcast called Far From Fact. It's a podcast for two Bangalorean based guys, really funny guys. So if you are into like a comedy based podcast, that's one, or the Monday Morning Podcast by Bill Burr, that's another one. If you're starting your podcasting journey, you should listen to Serial, as most people do, or listen to, if you're generally into like thriller and like crime, then listen to Case File. If you're into like mythology, listen to Lore. If you're into true crime in India, there is the Arushi Talwar case from way back when. There's a podcast on the Arushi Talwar case. I forget the name. I think it's called Talwar only, but that's an insane podcast. Like, you should hear that. I could go on and on. You're asking the worst person this question. I won't stop. So I'll just make sure that I won't go on with this. So there are a ton. Just fall down the rabbit's hole and keep consuming, I'd say.
Good to know, sir. I would surely listen to all of them that you listed. All right, sir, this is the end of the rapid fire round. Now, I would like to ask you the concluding question. There are.
Sorry?
I said this is the end of the rapid fire round. Now, I would like to ask you the concluding question.
Sure.
There are a lot of students out there with some of the most brilliant startup ideas, but they are often caught between the monetary aspect of things and their passion. So, how can this dilemma be faced, and what's your advice for the budding entrepreneurs?
That's a great question, and it's always a important question because have this fear कि like ठीक है my idea पे I'll start working on, but how will I support myself and my family? So now the thing is, if you have a really great idea and you're set on starting that idea, there are two ways to approach this. One is if you have responsibilities towards other people, I mean, that is definitely something that you should always put in front. If you're taking care of kids or you're taking care of your parents, like they are very important, and I'd be foolish to say, throw caution to the wind and just start building and not take them into consideration. There are two ways though. If you aren't somebody who needs to support other people, you can actually, the point is, how comfortable are you with sort of downsizing or upsizing your life personally? It's very easy, actually, to be honest. If you're able to, like a balloon, expand and contract in accordance to your situation, you're going to be pretty sorted, in my opinion. So if you're just looking after yourself, which is the case for a lot of people when they're just leaving college, you need to be mentally okay with being a proverbial balloon in this scenario, right? If like that means that you downsize the material stuff in your life as and when needed, and upsize them as and when needed, then so be it. And if that is worth it for you in sort of other trade-off to start the startup, that tells you how much you believe in your idea to begin with, right? So first of all, there's that idea, and that is a great validator in yourself, because firstly, that'll also tell you what you're giving up to actually do this, and it tells you how important the idea is to you, and it tells you how much you believe in yourself in making sure that the idea comes to life. The second thing that I do is, let's say hypothetically that's not an option for you and you do have some people that you need to look after. I would still never extinguish my like dream. Let's say my idea is in agri tech, music tech, for example. Let's say my idea is in food tech. I will try to join a job in food tech, and I will work as close to my idea as possible. So let's say, for example, I'm not even going to take the example of a startup. Forget a startup. Let's say I wanted to be a comedian, but I just didn't have the ability to take such a large punt. I would work at OML, which manages comedic talent. I would work at like I would work at like a water comic type, like establishment. I would intern at XYZ Avenues. I would basically try to surround my entire life, with the central point being the thing that I wanted to do most. I would make sure to align as many things across my life with that particular thing. So to make sure that I just can't run away from it. And so then I'll start getting in the money that I need on a monthly capacity, but I'd also be able to keep exploring the thing that I wanted to build. And then side may I'll continue to build on.
Okay, sir. So all they need to do now is to be determined and committed to their goals. They should make it clear in their minds that what they want to actually achieve, and they should be able to adapt themselves to dynamic environment, so that they should not face any problem after that. And
Correct.
after setting the goals and all, they should start working for it.
Correct.
All right, sir. Thank you, sir, for joining us today and for your wonderful insights. We are delighted to host someone of... Yes, sir.
No. Thank you so much.
Sir, we're actually delighted to host someone of your stature on our podcast. And on the behalf of the entire team at URJA and students of SGGSCC, we feel elated to have received the opportunity to have such a meaningful conversation with you.
But thank you so much, Harleen. You are far too kind. I don't deserve any of the words that you just said, but I'll take them nonetheless. I'll get me through the day. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you so much, sir.